which we find in Burke. And since imagination has a central role in the faculty of knowledge and knowing things, what comes out is that the imagination plays a central role in our experience of art. And then we talked about the idea of genius and how genius learns not from imitation but nature, and and he has the ability to produce aesthetic ideas where he uses imagination as cognition. Imagination as a faculty, uh, like I, that is something I couldn't get, but what you told us was that imagination, he uses imagination to understand and produce aesthetic ideas. And this idea of downplaying imitation brings him closer to Pope, because he's asserting nature here. And then we briefly also touched upon the contradiction of the Romantics, because Kant is going to have a huge influence on the Romantics, where you told that the Romantics focus on one hand on the individualism and subjectivity, but on the other hand they also try to speak for the community, as we saw in Wordsworth, where he is talking about the idea of the poet. And in that sense, you invoke a Marxist critique where the industrialized bourgeoisie is critiquing itself simultaneously, but also asserting itself. So yeah, that's where we stop.
Right. Now, that's fairly comprehensive. So what are those points that you did not understand? Can you come again so that we can clarify those?
Yes, sir. The idea of the negative emotion, while you were discussing Burke, and yes, and the second was the genius, where idea of the genius, where you talked about imagination. That the genius uses imagination to understand uh, as a faculty of cognition. Yeah, that.
Okay. That is in Kant, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. But that's fairly comprehensive kind of, I think, overview that Vijay has given. Talking about negative emotions in Kant, we should keep in mind that not Kant, but Burke, right? And Burke, what Burke is saying is that it's all about emotions and experience, right? And so those terrifying objects, or those things which overwhelm you emotionally and which are not pleasant, they are unpleasant, right? And that is what he means by negative emotions as unpleasant emotions. Kant, on the other hand, emphasizes not subjectivity or emotions, but the faculty of knowing itself. I hope you get the transcendental faculty of cognition is something that brings about the experience of sublime. Do you get the difference between the two? For Burke, it is the experience because of empiricism, right? Kant talks about the transcendental faculty of emotions, not emotion, transcendental faculty of cognition, which is responsible for production of sublime. And imagination, as you have been saying, is central to Kant's notion of comprehension. And we will see why. I will just point out those notes again so that you get what I'm saying. Does anyone have doubt about this? What do we mean by imagination having a central place in Kant's theory of cognition itself? Is you have to look at this. I will just point out. Okay, I will start sharing the screen, which will now help you. Okay, can you see this diagram? Can you see this diagram, all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you can
yeah.
see this is Kant's theory of transcendental idealism, right? Where this faculty of cognition is transcendent to subject and object, right? Mind and object, right? And that is what produces uh, comprehension of any kind, that this is a screen or this is something else, right? So how do we understand that this is a screen in front of you, phone or your laptop or PC or whatever you're holding in front of you? That gives light falls on it. It is then reflected back on your eyes, right? Eyes is sensory organs, something which is part of sensibility, and that's the term Kant uses, and that is given by, that is informed by transcendental aesthetic of space and time. Now, imagination transforms this sensory data into a form. It gives it a form. And this is recognized by understanding, which gives it a concept. Now, this happens in split of a second. And that is how you recognize this as a screen of the phone or screen of your laptop or screen of your PC. That's how you recognize it, right? So this is understanding or comprehension. So imagination, you can see, has a central role to play. Does that make sense, Big Vijay?
Yes, sir.
Now, what happens is in the case of aesthetic objects, right? There is no concept. So light falls on that painting or the sound from music that you are listening to is directed towards your sense organs, your eyes or ears, if you're listening to music. And imagination gives it form. But there are no concepts. Emotions. Yeah. So you can see it still passes through imagination. So whether it is comprehension or whether it is aesthetic experience, imagination occupies a central place here in Kant's theory. Now, what happens in sublime is that these experiences are too powerful, right? They are extremely powerful. So it impinges on your sensibility, it overwhelms your sensibility, it overwhelms your imagination, so that there is a kind of failure of imagination to produce any form. The form is not produced here, right? And the emotional response that you get is called sublime, and happens in case of, and so you can see how here it is still the transcendental cognitive faculty that is important for experience of sublime, right? Clear? And the examples that we gave were examples of say for example you are on Mount Everest and looking downwards, right? That's experience of sublime for you. Or you are in a spacecraft and you're looking at the solar system, that, or you're at night standing alone in the desert, Kutch desert, and you're looking at the sky, right? So all of those experiences can be seen as sublime. Yeah, so there are two questions, one from Jaldi and one from Smith. So who wants to go first?
Sir, I hope Smith doesn't mind if I go first, because mine is sort of related to what we just did.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not a question really, but so I was grappling with the difficulties that were posed by the whole apprehension recognition thing earlier as well. Now with this, the idea of sublime and everything, I got a little confused. So I tried to draw a map, and I would like you to point out the problems in it, or at least approve it if it's right. So can I do that? Can I share it in the chat box?
Yeah.
Right.
Or you can share your screen. Can you do that?
It won't be necessary. I can do that, but it won't be necessary. So
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
So since we were discussing the idea of the genius, that he or she draws directly from imagination. So that is why I try to sort of map it. Just a second, it's going. Okay. So can you see it?
You have put it in the chat box?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yeah.
There is something here. Okay. Let me open it. I'm waiting for that to open. Okay. Yes. Right. Yeah. So the question is.
So it's not much of a question. I just wanted to know if I did it correctly, since I'm trying to relate this to the idea.
It is perfect. It's perfect. Perfectly correct. Absolutely. Apprehension, reproduction, recognition. Correct.
These are the three stages, right?
Yes. On the left hand side, you have faculty of knowing, right? Process. And on the right is the process, right? Correct. It's correct.
So from this, we can draw the idea that the genius skips the third step of it, and he directly draws ideas and concepts from the second.
I'll just take call for a moment. Yeah. Yeah, so Jaldi, it's correct. Okay, so Smith, what's your question?
Sir, could you please repeat the idea of negative pleasure?
I can't hear you properly. What should I repeat?
The negative pleasure.
Aesthetic pleasure. Negative pleasure. That is in Burke, Smith. And Burke is an empiricist, and he's talking of negative emotions like terror, fear, unpleasant emotions, right? Which are a response to a person's experience, empirical experience, right? As Burke belongs to the empiricist tradition. And that is not what exactly Kant is talking about. Kant is talking about contra-purposiveness, which is the source of sublime. Right? And purposiveness is that faculty. Let me show you this. Can you see again my Word document?
Yes, sir.
Can you see this Word document, all of you? right? So
Yes.
what connects mind, the knowing mind, the cogito, with the object? Both have certain underlying. There are grounds which are transcendental to both mind and the object. So this transcendental faculty of knowing, cognition, is transcendent, means it's not limited to mind and object. And why does he say that? Is because of such kind of laws that we can derive. The sum of all angles of triangles is 180 degrees. How do we get this knowledge? Now, this is not based purely on experience, right? It's not proved by experience alone. It's proved by mathematics. I hope you get what I'm saying. So mathematics is a mental operation. So how is it that all empirical evidence can be and mathematical formula, there is a perfect match? How come that happens? Or look at this. This happens because of the transcendental faculty of cognition, right? And that is what he means by purposiveness. And in sublime, you have contra-purposiveness. Negative emotions are in Burke. Okay. Any questions? Any other person? There is some cricketer who is playing cricket. Cricketer 9022. You will have to mute yourself. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions, doubts about whatever we have discussed?
Sir,
Go ahead.
sir, on page number 376.
276. Okay. That is, we are talking of neoclassicism or 376?
Yes, 376.
It's just 376. Yeah, bolo.
The
Yeah,
first
go
para.
ahead.
Here,
76 first. Yeah.
characterizing about the sublime as
Okay. That's in negative pleasure in Kant, right? Right.
Yes.
It's same as Burke, but the difference lies in what causes the experience of sublime. For Burke, what produces experience of sublime is the experience itself, the object, right? You're overwhelmed by that object. While in Kant, it is the purposiveness which turns into contra-purposive. And this is the emotional state that it gives. Negative pleasure, not charm or love, but admiration or respect. When we judge an object as beautiful, our mind reposes in the state of restful contemplation. When you listen to music, say for example, then it gives you a sense of relaxation, right? Very often. Or a painting. But when you are doing bungee jumping, then you don't get that kind of experience, right? I hope you get what I'm saying. But still you get that thrill and fear and admiration for nature, right? So that is what is sublime. Does that answer your question? I don't know whose question it was. यहाँ पे पता नहीं चल रहा है मुझे किसने पूछा ये सवाल. Smith. Okay. Any other question? Yes, recording is happening, Diksha, don't worry. Okay, how many of you could listen to this lecture and how many of you could read up what we find in Habib? How many of you have read Habib? Raise your hands. Not all, maybe some part of it. Smith, you can lower your hand. I got that you have read it. Kritiksha. Okay, some parts fine. Who else? Digvijay. Okay. Amera. Okay. Only 4 people. Pooja. Okay. Jaldi. Okay. But finish it today, right? Asma. Anyone else? Mansi. Okay. How many of you missed some classes and heard the video recordings of the previous classes? Okay. Right. Now remember your experience of 5th semester. Just listening to lectures is not going to help unless you read, right? And in case you have missed the classes, you can always listen to the recordings. So it's always a better experience for live interaction. Live interactions are always better. But even then, in case you have missed. So if you're not working, then there is no use attending the classes, right? Because whatever you hear, you are going to forget by the time you end this class. So at the time of exams, when you start picking up your books, you will be clueless. Remember that. How many of you felt clueless at the time of exams? How many of you could identify with what I'm saying? That you did not read Habib and you just heard the classroom discussions, and online mode giving you plenty of distractions. You are doing so many other things. You may be sleeping, eating, and doing other activities which are not mentionable, right? You might be chatting in the group with your friends. So given this distractions, I don't think it's going to help you. How many of you can identify with this experience? So you have to keep reading. And if it is an essay, it's an offline examination, then we will have an essay type answers. So you have to practice writing as well. So what I suggest is that it would be a good idea that if you want to write and send me the notes, or attempt it, if you attempted to write an essay on Kant or Hegel, whom we'll discuss, or Wordsworth or Coleridge and others that we are going to discuss, and send it across to me, then you can always do that, right? Okay. So now, should we turn over the page and go over to the next critic? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the next important and one of the most influential philosophers of modernity and the condition that we are talking about right from our 5th semester is Hegel, right? And this is the period. You can see that Hegel belongs to uh, later generation German idealist philosophers after Kant, right? And he's important. Can you see my? Can you see this? My screen that I'm sharing?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So one of his most important books, and arguably one of the most difficult books on philosophy ever written, is The Phenomenology of Spirit. or the phenomenology of mind. And what is difference between mind and spirit is that the German term Geist, Geist, can be translated as spirit and mind. Right? It was published in 1807, right after Kant. It's one of the key books, key texts of Western philosophy. Other book of his is Science of Logic, which is extremely important and was revised and published in 1831. Other important works are Encyclopedia of Philosophical Science. It's a kind of summary of his entire philosophical system. And then his another very influential book is Elements of Philosophy of Right. You can see these are important works that were published during his lifetime. A lot of works were also appeared after his death posthumously. Right. So what is his philosophy? We'll take a look at that. Now, if you remember, going back to Kant, and he builds upon Kant and goes beyond Kant. If you look at the history of Western philosophy itself, then in Descartes, René Descartes and Enlightenment, you had a difference. You had this split between subject and object. Right? This is a subject from where you get word subjectivity, also cogito. Descartes, remember? Does anyone remember this? And what Descartes is saying that this distinction is very important. Is the fundamental distinction in philosophy, right? And he says that the whole entire universe or nature is divided into nature or object and thinking nature, right? Thinking substance, as he calls it. So substance is another word coming from Aristotle, right? So this split is fundamental to Enlightenment philosophy. And this distinction is the key distinction that you get in Enlightenment tradition, right? Now, what Kant says, as we have discussed, that the faculty of knowing, right, or the cognition or reason has a transcendental dimension, that it transcends both subject and the object. Is that clear? That's what we have been discussing. Any questions about this? This is what Kant has said.
Sir, can you repeat the object, nature, and substance thing? What is substance?
Nature and object is the object of knowledge, right? Subject and the object distinction of knowledge, right? And it also means nature in Kant. Object of your study, or what do you want to study, like Newton is trying to study something, is nature, but it's also substance, right? As Kant as Aristotle taught us, if you remember that, right? So it is almost synonymous. So there is this split is what I'm talking about, right? Any questions? You get what is substance? And cogito is also called thinking substance by Descartes. Right? And this is what Kant says. That cognition is transcendental. Any questions about this? That the faculty of knowing is transcendental. That is what that's why you get knowledge like E is equal to mc square, or scientific knowledge, which is product of human mind, but at the same time nature conforms to it, right? It's not that nature says no. In some places E is not going to be mc square. ऐसे nature नहीं कहता. I hope you get what I'm saying. So cognition, so knowledge, to get this kind of knowledge, right, it has to transcend both nature as well as thinking, mind. So mind and matter दोनों को transcend करता है cognition. This is what Kant points out, right? This is what we have discussed so far. Now, what Hegel is pointing out is this. Yeah, Titiksha. Yeah, Cartesian dichotomy is also limited, but mind and body is mind and matter, right? Body is matter. Titiksha, this is body. ये body भी है ना? This is Cartesian dichotomy, right? Okay. Now, what Hegel is saying is this: is that if faculty of cognition is transcendental, right, then the question arises, whose faculty is it? ये किसकी faculty है? Is it mind's, subject की है या किसकी है? Nature की है, किसकी है ये faculty? Whose faculty of knowing is it? Can you get my question?
Sir, could you please repeat Hegel's part?
So Hegel is asking that if, as per Kant says, faculty of cognition is transcendental, right? Then whose faculty is it? किसकी faculty of knowing है? कौन knowledge पा रहा है? Who is getting that knowledge? But faculty of knowing is transcendental to mind, right? बहुत ज़्यादा होने लगा इसलिए मैं यही कर रखता हूँ. Yeah. Whose faculty is it? And Jay says it is universal, and it is universal यानी क्या? Can you say something about it, Jay? Individual, but faculty of knowing has to be beyond individual. Jaldi.
Sir, I think
Yeah.
someone is seeing, I mean, someone is recognizing. It's not us, but there is, a part of us that is recognizing the cognition faculty. I mean, that is there in the cognition
Right.
faculty.
Part of us. Okay, part of us. Okay, which
Yeah,
part
I mean,
of us?
that is in our theory we call it a eye. So there are many eyes. So there is an eye which sees everything.
तो कौन सा eye है वो? You are right.
That
Very
is
good.
the, I think, the observer eye. I think.
Observer का है?
I mean, who recognizes the cognition, who is there in the intellectual faculty of mind.
Okay. Hegel says that the entity which obtains this knowledge, like E is equal to mc square or F is equal to ma, or sum of all angles of triangle, is subject as capital में subject है. Yeah, it's absolute, universal self-consciousness. This subject, right, which is beyond you and I. This is you and I, Jay. This is small I. ये Jay है, right? ये जल्दी है, ये सचिन है. But this subject is transcendental. Does that make sense to people? It's very abstract, and that's why it's challenging to understand. But I'm sure it's interesting. Yeah, as Jaldi says, it's universal nature. So this is one intervention by Hegel, which is extremely important. That, and he says subject, right, is grasped as substance in this. Does that make any sense? Yeah, go ahead, Jai.
So according to Kant, he says that the cognition faculty uh, is a part of the absolute, but then our reasoning is not based on the absolute. It's based on our conditions. It's based on our environment. So how can that be a part of absolute? So we have to divide it,
reasoning
right?
has no. You have to get this. Reasoning is not based on your particular environment. जैसे कि mathematical reasoning, f is equal to ma. If you have to derive, then it is not Jai's cultural context that matters. I hope you get it. You have to follow the rules of mathematics, and you have to follow the transcendental faculty of cognition itself. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes, sir, but like we are not connected with the absolute, so
अब तू
we
बोलेगा
cannot.
कि मैं गुजराती, तू गुजराती है?
Yes, sir.
तो मैं गुजराती हूँ, इसलिए f is equal to ma मुझे लागू नहीं होता. ऐसे नहीं कह सकता.
Yeah.
You have to derive the universal knowledge, right? Or E is equal to mc square, or sum of all angles of triangles is 180 degrees, is derived through certain universal laws of reasoning or universal norms which are transcendental to your individual subjectivity.
Right.
Right? Now, Kant has said about beauty, yes, but Kant does not posit this subject. Etiksha. The idea of absolute is not central to Kant, right? So you can see he is taking a step beyond Kant, right? Universal subjective, Titiksha, is aesthetic experience that is transcendental, right? Titiksha?
Sir, am I? I'm just gonna say what I understood, and so Kant basically, when he talks about subjectivity, but also something which is universal, he talks about beauty, and in that sense, it's about
He
aestheticism
talks
in a way.
about faculty of cognition, purposiveness, right? He talks
Right.
about this, and because of this, aesthetic emotions get this universality. Because of this. Right? So universality is achieved in beauty because of transcendental faculty of reason. He
Yes,
does
sir.
not extend. This is not central to Kant.
So could you repeat how is it? I mean, different in the sense that what I could understand was that Kant was talking about beauty, and it in a way is it in a way deals with aestheticism, whereas perhaps Hegel is talking about not just beauty or aestheticism but everything encapsulated in it.
Exactly. And that is only through subject, which is absolute or
Right.
self-conscious,
Right.
which is transcendental to your. It's not Titiksha or Jaldi, or it's not Digvijay or Jay or Smith, or Sachin, right? It's absolute, universal self. You can say that, right? Is that much clear?
Yes, sir. I got it now.
And how many of you are baffled by this discussion? Exasperated, confused? क्या चल रहा है? Headache शुरू हो गया है? ऐसा किसी को है? Good. You paid fees for this. Pooja, you asked for it. Mansi, you asked for it. Jelta? Okay. So, and it's perfectly fine, right, to experience this, because these are extremely abstract and complex ideas, right? And phenomenology of spirit is one of the most difficult texts in philosophy. So if you are exasperated and confused, it's perfectly normal reaction. Anybody can have it. And how many of you who are confused found it interesting?
So I found it very interesting.
Okay. Right. Okay. Now let's take another step which Hegel introduces, which is another radical idea. He says that Descartes, right, he is historically precedes Kant, right? ये शायद 15th-16th century होगा, right? Maybe, I'm not very sure. Somebody can just search for the dates of Descartes. Descartes. Right. Kant comes later and Hegel comes after that. So there is a kind of temporality and historicity to the point where you reach this. Right. There is a particular, what should I say? Historicity to this process. 16th century, right? This is late 16th century. Kant is 18th century and Hegel is 19th century. Right. Yeah. So you can see that to reach this point of knowledge, to grasp subject as substance, right? Subject as substance. And what is rational is real. What is real is rational. Is what Hegel asserts, building upon Kant and critiquing Kant. Substance to be grasped as subject. It took this whole historical process of concretely unfolding history. So he introduces history to the point from where you realize your self-consciousness, right? The absolute is realized historically, right? Does that make sense? Anybody has a doubt, question about this? It's not all of a sudden that it happens, right? In some sense, absolute being is a process of becoming from 16th, 19th, 18th to 19th. So self-realization of consciousness, right, happens historically. It unfolds historically. So far with me? Okay.
Sir, a question. When we talk about consciousness, what do we mean here in this context? Is it the same that we understand it right now?
Very good question, and that's why it's called phenomenology of knowledge, spirit, right? And what do you mean by phenomenology? Is study of phenomena. And phenomena, as Kant has taught us, is something that can be known and experienced through knowledge, through this transcendental faculty of knowing, right? Phenomena, noumena distinction याद है किसी को? Kant makes a distinction between intelligible and knowable, right? And this distinction yeah. So if you remember the discussion on noumena and phenomena, right? Does anyone remember that? So phenomenology is scientific study of phenomena, right? That is the world as can be known and understood, not just experienced or intelligible, right? But known, like E is equal to mc square or F is equal to ma. So study of phenomena is called phenomenology, right? And it involves both subject and object. So subject object distinction is in some way transcended by phenomenology, right? Is that much clear? What is phenomenology? It's a philosophical method or science of transcending Cartesian dichotomy between knower and the known. And that always happens. Say, for example, when you are crossing a street and you see a truck and you stop, right? Now, your behavior is not governed by, you don't think. There is no thinking that happens. It happens just like that, right? Because the knower and the known are only different in theory, but in our experiential world, knower and the known are not distinctive. So phenomenology is the philosophy where you don't make a distinction between knower and the known. Does that make sense to anyone? Any queries about that? Titiksha?
No, sir, this much is clear. This much is clear.
Right. And what is Smith
Sir, can
asking?
you
Yeah, repeat what?
you gave the example for the truck and the individual. Can you give one more example for that?
It's not that कि मैं ट्रक आते हुए देखता हूँ फिर मैं सोचता हूँ ये ट्रक है या ट्रक का आभास है या ये पेड़ चलने लगा है और बाद में मैं डिसीजन लेता हूँ ऐसे नहीं होता ना you immediately reflexively move back. So there is no object-subject distinction actually in our experiences. It's there only in theory. In thought, you make a distinction between knower and the known. Right? So in a sense, say for example, in your dream, you are chased by a mad dog, right? And you run reflexively. But suddenly you realize that you're dreaming. You wake up and you realize you're dreaming, right? So in dreams, subject does not ask question, ye dream hai ya satya hai? Because that subject-object distinction does not exist even in dreams, right? And so this is question of consciousness. By consciousness, we mean phenomenological. That is, you are studying a science of experiences where the distinction between the knower and the known is, to use a technical term, bracketing. That is the term used in 20th century phenomenology. And some of the important philosophers in 20th century were people like Husserl, Merleau-Ponty, and Heidegger. These three are important 20th century philosophers of phenomenology. Is that much clear, Kritiksha? So it's about experience, right? Where there is no distinction made between knower and the known. So whether the dog that is chasing you in your dream is reality, actual dog, or a dog in your dream is not something that you think about. You don't say, I'm sleeping and there is no real dog. You realize that only when you are awake.
So, sir, that is consciousness.
Right.
Having no distinction between the knower and the known, or the subject and the object, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, sir.
So it's a philosophical approach, and you find its origins in Kant, right? Who uses the term phenomena and noumena. So noumena is something that can be thought of but not understood. Or I'm sorry, not experienced, like will or God or whatever, right? You can think about it, posit it, but you do not experience and experience or know it. Right? Or the thing in itself, as Kant calls it, as against thing as we know it, right? The pen as thing in itself versus thing as we know it, right? So Smith, is that clear? And this is historical according to Hegel. This 16th, 18th, 19th. So it's a temporal process of self-realization, right? And this process is described as something called dialectic, which we will discuss in the next class, right? So what we'll do is we'll understand dialectic on Wednesday. Tomorrow we are not meeting because I am in the an official meeting tomorrow, right? So I'm stopping here for today. Any questions about whatever we have discussed? Unconscious is a term that was coined by Freud in late 19th century, after or beginning of 20th century. So historically, the idea of unconscious is not prominent in Kant or Hegel. It's not given much importance. Smith, historical answer. So you are doing Stavan's job, it seems, today. Okay. Yeah. Jay is asking, knower is the observer. I think that idea of observer is not to be brought here. Knower and the known.
Actually, I felt very this very relevant to the theory that I studied, so that's why I.
Yes, we will talk about those theories also, because Hegel used to teach Vedanta and Upanishads, and he had problems with that, right? He was critical of those theories. In what way? We will discuss it later, right? He taught Buddhism as well in his university. Okay, so tomorrow we are not meeting because I am in an official meeting, so we will meet day after tomorrow, right? So, so all clear for now. So I will end today's discussion then. And this is available in recording after some time. So those who want to clarify concepts, you can listen to this recording again. Right? Okay. So have a nice day. We'll meet day after tomorrow, not tomorrow.